People say that lives can become unpredictable. Some people can have happy lives, some others can have bad lives. On the island of Sodor, people always think that you'll always have a happy life. Some of the engines will tell you otherwise, though, as there have been many engines that have not actually had a full career on Sodor. People that have very unsuccessful careers, and engines that have come to Sodor but never left. One of those engines was me. I remember the day I was built, 1925. I had been built by a crew to work on a railway, though I didn't know what railway I would work on. As soon as I was built, I went under test trials to see how I would perform. I was an experimental engine, and was of a new class of engine, a class that had not been named yet. And then, after my trials, I proved quite successfully, and I was stored in search of a new home. A few weeks after my trials, I soon figured out that the island of Sodor, particularly the Northwestern Railway, was in search of an engine to work on their line, as one of their engines had just been killed in a tragic train accident. I never learned the specifics of the accident itself. And so, my owner at that time decided to send me on to Sodor, and he then told me that I was specifically built to work on Sodor. However, it took them much time to figure out if I was expensive or not. But good thing, the Fat Controller at the time bought me for a cheap price, and soon I would come to Sodor. I soon arrived on Sodor on October 24th, 1925. And I realized that there were not many engines on the railway at that time, as only a couple engines were in use at that time. But I do remember a lot of their names: Thomas, Edward, Gordon, Henry, all those guys. However, there were two specific locomotives that I was very close to. They didn't have names, only numbers: 58746 and 58747. At the time, I was the only other red engine on the railway, and us three were known as the Red Musketeers. However, unlike 58746 and 58747, I didn't have a number, not even a name. So, I was nameless for my entire life. However, 2 days after I arrived on Sodor, during my trials for the railway, Edward decided to give me a name. And so, he named me by my color, red. So, I was known as Red my entire life. Everyone liked me, except 58746 and Gordon. Gordon was the worst of the two. He despised me as an engine. He claimed that I was an improper engine, and that I was just a replica or so of a regular goods engine, even though I was built for mixed traffic work, which meant I could carry both passengers and goods trains. I was really nervous, as I said on my first day on the job. However, for the first couple of weeks, I actually did pretty well on my first couple of weeks on Sodor. I proved to be a strong workhorse on the railway, and delivered both passengers and goods trains. Still, Gordon was not impressed, but Edward and Henry both liked me, along with a 58747, who seemed that she was the only engine that actually really cared about me and had feelings for me. I was hoping that this would be a new life. However, my life didn't turn out as I planned to. My first accident took place a month after my arrival on Sodor. I was taking a passenger train down to Marin. However, something really strange happened. I was riding a bend, and then I fell off the tracks. Luckily, I remained upright on the tracks, and I stopped just a few meters of the rails due to me going at a very slow speed, so the damage was not serious. However, when Edward came to arrive with the breakdown train, Gordon came by, laughing, claiming that I was a disgrace to the railway. Edward told me not to listen to him, but deep down inside, I was hurt. Still, I didn't know what had caused me to crash. I was going at the safe normal speed, and still, I wrecked. However, after just a few hours of maintenance, I was ready to put back into service. The next week, however, things only got worse. During my time on Sodor, my class has given a name, the NWR K class. Me being the first ever K class specifically built for the Northwestern Railway. As I said before, however, my life was only gonna get worse from that first accident. A week after my first accident, I was traveling home, light engine. Everything was going fine. Then all of a sudden, I felt my wheels leave the rails, and I once again fell off the tracks. Then, that time, I nearly flipped over. Luckily, I landed on a rock, so it didn't do much damage. However, my front was very bad dented. At this point, I was trying to get the sense of everything. Why did I have crashed a third time while I was going at a safe speed? Gordon, the ignorant that he was, claimed that I was going a bit too fast. I, however, knew that I was going the safe speed limit. And then, a few weeks later, it happened again. This time, I was pulling a passenger train, when all of a sudden, my brakes failed, and I crashed into an unmanned brake van. Again, no one was hurt. However, it was still getting quite confused at what in the world was causing me all these crashes. Then, it happened again. I fell off the rails, and again, I continued to have a number of accidents, and I was said to rough Riley on the rails. By the end of my first year on Sodor, I had suffered 42 crashes. After that, the Fat Controller took me off the main line to see what was wrong. The K class I was known was depending on me if I was to be successful. Why did my trials work so useful while on Sodor they failed? They soon found out the answer. I soon found out that my builders had rushed my construction, and some of my parts were not placed properly. This led me to rough Riley on the rails, causing many accidents. So Tom didn't know how to fix me at that time, and so he put me back on the rails. However, he decided to put me on limited passenger and freight duties in hopes of not causing another accident. In February of 1926, I was put back into service, this time with limited amounts of trains that I used to carry. I was sad by this. I wasn't able to carry the amount of trains I was told to pull. However, I was told that this would have to work if I was to become successful, and the NWRK class would become official. 2 weeks after that, I suffered yet another accident. I flew off the rails near a bridge. Luckily, I didn't went over. However, I became very close to certain death. For months to come, I would suffer numerous accidents, ranging from hitting signal boxes to completely flying off the rails. So Tom did the best option. He put me off the mainline duties and put me on shunting duties. I didn't mind though. I knew this was for the best of me, and I thought that shunting would put me right. At least I wasn't pulling trains where I would cause people to get hurt, or even worse. However, on my first day of shunting, something terrible happened. I remember it very well. I was pushing a couple of trucks into a siding. Little did I know, a workman was in between the trucks. When I saw him, I even had enough time to stop. However, my brakes failed, and I crushed the man to death. After that, many of the engines didn't trust me, except Henry, Edward, and Even, 58747. They cared about me, and thought it was just an accident. I was still under the grief that I actually killed the man. After that, I was still put on shunting duties. A week after the incident, where I killed the guy, I was pushing a brake van to a siding, and a guard was inside, getting ready for the day's work. What I didn't know, however, was that the tracks had a very bumpy section, and this also prevented my brakes from working yet again, and the van crashed through a gate. Again, the guard was killed. By month 2 of me working as a shunting engine, despite me being a tender engine, I had killed 20 people. People began to wonder what the heck was wrong with me. A month later, I was put on workman duties. However, it only got worse. I remember very well. I was pulling a workman train down to the viaduct. However, my brakes failed yet again, and I flew off the rails and nearly crashed into Kronk Station. Even though I didn't run over anyone, a passenger later died of a heart attack. Everyone blamed the accident solely on me. My crew thought otherwise. Knowing my overall condition, and that it may have been causing the accidents, so Tom Hatt did the next best thing. He took me off shunting duties and put me on a new job. In 1930, Sir Tom Hatt had opened the Big Misty Valley branch line, a branch line that ran from Kilgodrick up to Callan Castle, and it went to Castle Walk. He put me on this job as its solely #1 engine, and so I was known as Red, the branch line engine, when I went to work on the Big Misty Valley branch line. My job on the branch line was pretty simple. I would take tourists to Callan Castle and back again. It was pretty easy too, knowing that I would just have to turn around, take the train back home. It was also a goods branch line, and I would run maintenance trains and other important goods up to Callan Castle and back. I always thought the view to be absolutely wonderful, and I absolutely loved passing through Castle Walk. However, things began to happen yet again. My accidents kept returning. It was an early spring night in 1938. I was taking the last train of the day for the branch line. It was a maintenance train, so there wasn't any passengers. However, when I left, I accidentally ran over a guy's leg. It had to be amputated, but he died of blood loss the next day. I was grief-stricken. Still, many of the engines considered me a bad luck engine, and even Gordon called me Bad Luck Red. However, I wanted to prove myself wrong, and I still worked on the branch line. 58747 still believed in me, along with Henry and Edward. Still, my accidents happened again, and they got worse and worse. I remember I was pulling a ballast train once, and while I was crossing the causeway, I nearly fell into the river. I only fell as close to my buffer beams as I ended up in the water. Still, I came very close yet again to certain death. Another time, I literally ran right past the station at Callan Castle and crashed through the barrier. I suffered very much damage. Many workmen considered me a bad luck engine too, and they didn't even want to work with me. Then, on September 17th, 1939, something happened that would change my life forever. On that day, I had just left Kilgodrick Station with a fully loaded passenger train, and was heading up the Castle Walk once again. There was a slight mist in the air, and as I raced along the line, I felt very uneasy. As I raced along the line, as I crossed around the bend, I saw a group of children in a school bus waiting to pass a level crossing. However, I had the right of way, as at that time, trains always had the right of way to pass, and so the school bus had to wait until I had passed with my fully loaded passenger train. I whistled a friendly toot to the kids, and they all waved in hello. I was very fond of children, and they still called me Red, even though they knew of my past troubles. However, something happened on that day that I totally regret. I soon got closer and closer to the level crossing, and the school bus just stood there, a perfect safe distance away from the tracks. However, something terrible happened. Next thing I knew, I was off the tracks yet again. I heard a terrible screeching noise. I swerved off the tracks and was heading straight for the school bus. I can still hear the screams of those children as they saw a gigantic train heading straight towards the school bus. I was hoping they were able to get out of the way, but It was too late. The school bus was gone. When I opened my eyes, my wheels sat at the very spot where the bus was. Smoke, bodies, laid everywhere. I was so ashamed of what I had done, even though it wasn't my fault. All the children and the bus driver, 14 in all, perished in that accident. The bus was totally destroyed. It was found at that moment, literally almost everyone on the railway, including some of the engines, distrusted me and thought it was much better if I was taken off the line. That's what Stamha did. He took me off the line in 1939. However, he didn't want me to put me to scrap just yet, as he still thought I was a really useful engine. So, he did the next best thing. I was put into a mine shaft, where I was said to be really useful once again, and there I stood for the majority of World War II. I could hear air raid sirens screaming into the night, and wondering, did those engines still alive, or did some of them die? For almost 6 whole years, I stood there in that tunnel, and I began to have visions. One vision was me, a hungry heap of scrap, sitting on a track, literally on fire. One other, I was pulling a passenger train that immediately engulfed it in flames. I was horrified. Me, Red, suffering such terrible premonitions. I didn't know what to do. I just wanted to end my life to be over. And to my surprise, my life was given a second chance in 1946. In January of 1946, I learned that the Sodor was going to make up a new train, the Royal Sodor Express. And they needed an engine, as all the engines were busy. To my surprise, Sodom came to me. "Will you pull this train, Red?" he asked. "Yes, I would, sir," I said. And soon, I was fired up, cleaned up, put all the rust out of my boiler, and I was put back on the surface, after being stuck in that mine shaft since 1939. How I was lucky, as I really wanted to be back in that mine, as what would happen next. January 27th, 1946. It was a day that I would lose my life. I soon backed down onto the coaches for the brand new Royal Sodor Express. It was mainly just the coaches, but I didn't mind. Any job was important to me anyway. I looked to my side. There was Edward and Gordon. Gordon still laughed it off, saying that I didn't even involve to be back on this railway. Edward, however, wished me the best of luck. I wished him the best too on his night branch line train. It was the last time I would see both of them. At 10:30 p.m., I set out that night with 3 fully loaded coaches of the Royal Sodor Express, carrying 50 passengers, my crew, and the guard. 53 people in all were on board that train. And as I set off into the night, I didn't know that I would not come back. It was a splendid run that night. The rails hummed, the night was cool and crisp, the moon shone brightly, and I was on my way through the darkness with my new train, the Royal Sodor Express. I was soon making good time on my run, and I was wondering what could ever happen. I was enjoying my life now. It seemed that my life had a new future. I was no longer Bad Luck Red. I was ready to do anything possible. The night was dull, quiet, except for my train. I was soon approaching Henry's Tunnel, where I would pass under. I always liked this tunnel, as it was nice, peace, and quiet. Little did I know, it would be the exact place where my demise. I approached the tunnel. The night was crisp. An owl hooted as I entered the tunnel. Suddenly, as if something happened, I heard a screeching noise. My brakes had jammed. I stopped directly inside the tunnel. I was all alone with my passengers and crew. The passengers didn't know what was going on. Some of them even walked outside to see what was going on. My driver tried the best he could, but he couldn't just get the brakes off. I sat there with my train, all alone. Then I heard a noise, like a rock falling. A rock had just landed right in front of my buffers. Suddenly, the silence of the tunnel was clearly changed by the roaring sound. I knew what that meant. The tunnel was about to collapse. The passengers began to scream, but it was all drowned out by the sounds of the mine. Rocks began to fall. The lights in the coaches went out. Nothing could be done. As my last words, I let out one final scream. The entire tunnel had collapsed, killing me and everyone else inside. Everyone died. There were no survivors. The next day, the cleanup began, and I watched as a ghostly specter. I couldn't feel pain anymore. I couldn't feel sad. I felt nothing. And when they finally reeled out what had happened, the crushed bodies, my crushed body as well, twisted metal steel, the wrecked coaches, it was hard to believe that it was me that had died in that way. The big Misty Valley branch line was closed, and the Royal Sodor Express runs no more after its first day of service. And now, here I am, a ghostly specter wandering the tracks where my death occurred. I had killed so many innocent lives. And why? It was because of my design. I was designed as one of the best ever red engines ever to be seen on Sodor. Instead, it was my downfall. A tender engine killed so many innocent lives. 53 people were killed that night in the train accident in the tunnel. And now, Henry Tunnels knew, but no one remembers my death. They've all forgotten about it. That was then. This is now. The moon will rise, and I will run once again. A red ghost train running down the line of the island of Sodor, from where I was. Witness me, and you'll remember what really happened. I am Red, the ghost train of Sodor.